Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm going to start this class. Don't see anyone logged in yet, but I want to get it started. And today I want to talk about flash photography. Not necessarily flash photography, but how to use your flash on your camera. And okay, hopefully I'm not getting a double recording here. I've got my volume turned down on my phone. Okay, so I know what I have to do is turn my volume down here. Let's see. Trying to figure out how to do that so I don't hear anything.
Hello?
Hey, Ruben, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Can't complain too much. Can't complain too much. I'm alive.
I know that's the answer these days.
Yeah, you just gotta stay positive, kinda.
Testing, 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 testing. Got to be able to mute my. Okay, test. No, I still hear it. Trying to mute my volume here.
If you can't
Anyway.
mute your volume, you can just lower the volume on your phone.
No, I'm just hearing a double thing because I got my phone going here.
Okay.
Uh, and I'm trying to turn that off, but that's okay. That's all right. Okay, what I want to talk about today is how to use your flash on your camera. And I think you, Ruben, you asked me at one point, what do you do when your shutter speeds get too low, too slow
Yeah.
inside? And yeah, whenever you get to a point where your shutter speeds are, you know what? This phone is really bugging me, and because I keep hearing, and I can't seem to turn the volume down on this. Uh, Test media test testing testing. I'm gonna try and go to airplane mode here. Testing testing. Okay, that I think that did it. Okay. Still see this camera. No, I'm not hearing that. Okay. Um, yeah, when you get to the point where, oh, you know what? Did my camera just go off now?
Yeah, I think it did.
Okay, so airplane mode isn't going to do that. Dang it. Sorry about all this stuff here, but I'm trying to. Okay, so now I got to log in again. Dang it. Let me just close out on all of this stuff here. Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to have to join this meeting again from my phone. It's 9644 2029 2029 745. Okay. And I am going to not join with audio. There we go. Better. Okay, sorry about that, Ruben. Hi, Lauren. How are you?
Very
Hey,
good.
Brian.
Hello.
Uh, when you get to the point, and that's what we're going to talk about this morning, is when you get to the point where you're indoors and you need to, take a decent shot. Low lighting is kind of the worst thing that can happen with your camera. Low light is always a challenge for cameras, and the reason is because the shutter speeds get too slow. You need the shutter to open and close. It needs to let enough light in order to make the exposure. And obviously, when you don't have a lot of light, it stays open longer. And when it does, any little shake of your camera is going to blur the shot. So it's really hard to take a focused shot inside of a low lit room, and that's where flash comes in. So what flash does is it throws out an incredible amount of light. In fact, we usually we don't really realize how much light is being thrown out. But if you took a video of someone shooting a camera with flash, and if you stopped the video on the frame where the flash went off, you would see that that flash lit up the entire room. I mean, it's like a nuclear explosion that happens. And we don't experience that because it happens so fast. It's just this flash of light that we see, and our eyes adjust very quickly. So we really don't see how much light is actually emitted from even the small pop-up flash on your camera. But what it's doing is it's throwing out light in, a fraction of a second, enough to enable your camera to have a faster shutter speed in order to capture that motion or that scene without blur. And that's basically what flash is doing. Flash light enables the camera to have a faster shutter speed. Shutter speed is probably one of the most important concepts of photography to get a focused shot without blur. Most of the time, blur is because of camera shake. The human body moves no matter how still you try and hold yourself. Breathing, holding your breath, exhaling your breath, and trying to keep your body still. You're still shaking to some degree, and that tiny little movement, just your heart beating, is going to shake your camera enough where you're going to get a soft shot, a blurry shot. So that's where we need flash. So to answer your question, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to be in a low light condition, especially when you're shooting something that's moving. Okay, you could have your camera on a tripod in a low lit room, and you might say, well, my camera's not moving. It's rock solid on a tripod. Why do I need flash? Well, you need flash because the subject's moving. Okay, and when the subject moves, you have the same possibility of blur. So we have to have a fast shutter speed. Now, if you're shooting, I've done a lot of outdoor night photography where I'm focused on a building, and that building is not moving, and the lights around it, they're not moving. And so I can shoot that without flash. I don't care how long the shutter stays open. Shutters could stay open for minutes, and it would still be an absolutely focused shot because nothing moved. The camera didn't move, the building didn't move, so shutter speed is irrelevant at that point. But once you have movement in the shot, then shutter speed is everything, especially if you want to capture and freeze that movement. Now, you've seen a lot of shots where, let's say you're setting up your camera on a freeway, on a freeway overpass, and you're shooting the freeway, and everything is in focus except for what? What's moving, right? The cars. And so you have this solid line of red and this solid line of white, and that's the blur, okay? And that's actually an effect that you want to achieve. But I took a shot at and just to emphasize this point, let me just switch to the shot that I'm talking about, and just to show you, it's in my Google Images here. Just going to go real quick to, the typical shot of LA, and it was shot on the 4th Street Bridge in LA a long time ago. Not too long ago, but let's see if I have that album down here. It was a trip that I took with my friend, and we went down and we shot. Oh, here it is. Okay. So here's the famous shot. Okay. Now this was shot with a tripod. I'm standing on the bridge, okay, and I'm focused out on LA, and these buildings, they're not moving a bit, and neither is my camera. And my exposure in this was probably I don't know, maybe a minute, 2 minutes. And what was moving were the cars, and so you get this streak of light going this way and this way, and there were cars actually coming down this street here too, so you could see a little bit of that. There were cars going down this street into downtown, so you get the streak of red lights. What's really cool is if there's a bus that comes by where the lights are really high on the bus, and you get these streaks like right in here, right high. But anyway, this is a long exposure shot, and in this case you don't want to use flash, you don't need to use flash, but you are going to get blur. Now if I wanted these cars in focus, okay, it just wouldn't happen. Okay, it's an impossible shot at night to get these cars in focus, because you would need such a fast shutter speed in order to do that, and you couldn't get it with that low of lighting conditions. We would have to bring out giant movie quality studio lights and shine it down on the freeway in order for me to even try and get those cars in focus. So it's literally impossible. And that's why, when a lot of people go to, like in Newport Beach during Christmas, it's coming up, where they have the boat parade in the harbor. I don't know if you've ever gone down there, right? It's one of the most difficult types of photography to take. You're trying to shoot boats going down the harbor at night, and you have your little tiny pop-up flash, and you're still getting blurry shots because it's basically an impossible shot to get. Okay, so don't even try. Just go down there and enjoy the show with your eyes. But to try and photograph that, all you're going to do is just get it's going to be a whole bag full of hurt, because it's just not possible. So anyway, long answer to a question, but yeah, you need flash when you're in a room. Okay, let me go back to, so let's talk about that. But before I talk about that, one more time, sorry. Let me just go to oh, shoot. Sorry. I wanted to go to, our class, because I put something up here that I want to bring attention to, and that was in the assignments when we talked about aperture, and it was the very first assignment where I asked you to watch the video about the exposure triangle and aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So what I did here was I put up a chart here. I made this chart, and it's called the Canon 18-55 variable aperture lens chart. Now this chart is going to give you information about the lens that you guys are using. And remember, we said it was a variable aperture lens, meaning that you don't get your widest aperture at all focal lengths. And that's what a variable aperture lens means, is that you only get your largest aperture at certain focal lengths. Now you have to be at 18 millimeters, very wide, zoomed out all the way, in order to get 3.5. Once you zoom in all the way to 55, then you can, the largest aperture you can get is 5.6. You can't get 3.5 at 55 millimeters with your lens. So I wanted to make this chart so that you're kind of aware of the limitations of the lens that you guys have. And that's what makes the lens inexpensive. And rather than going into why it's inexpensive and what makes it inexpensive, let me just say that variable aperture lenses are always less expensive than full aperture lenses. Like some lenses at 18, in my case, in my lens, at 17, I can get 2.8. Okay, that's just because that was the way that lens was designed. So every lens is different, and when you do buy a lens, what you're going to want to know is what is the aperture range on that lens. And if you need a lens to open up really wide because you want to take portraits or you want to take shallow depth of field shots like product photography, then you're going to have to buy a lens that has these apertures over here, the 1.8 and the 2.8. And when you get into these kind of lenses, get ready to pull your wallet out because they're going to be a little bit more expensive. Sometimes a lot more expensive. I mean, it could be literally $1,000 more expensive for the same lens that only has, for the same variable aperture lens. Okay, so just kind of know that, and I put this chart up here so that you can also see the intermediate stops in between your major full stops. And I didn't really explain this fully, but the stops in red are what are called full stops. These are the major aperture openings of any camera lens. Now, again, some lenses go down wider, open up wider than others, but basically we're talking about 2.8, 4, 5, 6, 8, 11, 16, and 22. Those are things that most photographers have memorized. But your camera will go in between those full stops. It will go into thirds of a stop. And all Canon lenses and Nikon lenses and Sony lenses, every camera manufacturer is the same. All lens manufacturers manufacture their lens in thirds of a stop. So when you're clicking through your apertures, when you're spinning through, after 4, you're going to see 4.5. And after 4.5, you're going to see 5. And then after that, you'll see 5, 6, and all the way through in thirds of a stop. And what that means is that the opening of the iris of your lens is opening up a third more than 4.0. And a third more than 4.5. And then you get to a full stop. Now, a full stop simply means that there's twice as much light coming through. So it's a doubling. So the difference between 4 and 5.6 is that twice as much light is coming in at f4 than at 5.6. Twice as much light is coming in, at f5.6 than at f8, and then so forth down the line. So you're getting a doubling of light or a halving of light, depending on which way you go. Okay, there's half the amount of light that comes through at f22 than at f16. So, and all of that basically translates into shutter speed, how fast your shutter speed is going to happen, and also what your depth of field is going to be, whether it's shallow or whether it's deep. So it's an important concept of photography to know. I know it's not the most exciting thing, but if you know this, you'll know how to use it in terms of the type of shot that you want to achieve. And this is the range of your particular lens. So I specifically made it for your lens. Every lens is going to be different, but most lenses have these apertures. Mostly all lenses have at least from around f4 to f22. And then some lenses go this way, the ones that go this way, and the more they go this way, the more expensive they get. Apparently it's more expensive to manufacture those lenses with large aperture openings. Okay, so that needs to be said, and that needs to be kind of understood as you move on. Okay, so let's talk about flash. You have a flash. I'm going to use my camera at this point here. you have a flash on your camera. I'm going to move this around so hopefully you can see this. Little pop-up flash up here. And when you're on aperture priority or AV at the top here, you have to manually pop up your flash in order for it to work. And the way you do that is through a little button that should be right somewhere next to the flash unit itself, and it has a little lightning bolt on it. And when you, let me turn this on, when you press that button, your pop-up flash will pop up. Okay. Now the flash on these cameras are really pretty bad. They're extremely small. I mean, we're only talking about, maybe 1.5 inches wide by what? 1/4 of an inch, or not even 1/2 inch high. And there's a tremendous amount of power that comes out of this little tiny thing here. It's meant to throw out, as much possible light as this camera is designed to do. And it does it in a very small opening here. Now, there's a principle of light, and we haven't even gotten into talking about lighting, but in light, whether it's video light or whether it's photography light, there's a principle, and the principle says that the smaller the source of light, the harder the light is. The larger the light source, the softer the light is. Now, those two terms, hard light and soft light, simply mean the intensity of the light that's hitting the subject. And when you're flashing hard light at a subject, you get very harsh shadows. You get very hard, defined shadows. The sun outdoors is probably the hardest light that that there is. And to give you an example of what a hard light shadow is just stand out in the sun, at 10 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and look at your shadow. It's very crisp. It's very defined. Okay? It's just very hard edged. You can draw it. It's just like a silhouette. But then towards the end of the day or early in the morning, as the sun starts setting, look at your shadow. And your shadow not only is very long because of the angle of the sun, but it's also softer. And, soft light. And the reason it's softer is because the sun actually is closer. When it's closer to the horizon, it becomes softer light. All right, with that said, this is a very small light source, and so we are going to get very harsh shadows from this light. Another thing that's terrible about these on-camera lights is that it's pointed straight at you. And in lighting, we never want to point a light directly at a subject unless we want hard light on the subject. If it's people that we're shooting, the only time we would point a light at a person's, directly at a person's face is if it was very soft light. It was very diffused light. Like light coming in through a window, through a curtain. If it's hitting your face directly, it's still diffused, it's still soft. So you don't get those real hard shadows. But this light is going to give you some of the hardest shadows that you've ever seen. In fact, when you shoot with flash photography, what ends up happening is it looks like someone took a flashlight and just shined it right directly in your face. Your eyes get weird, you get red eye, you get all kind of weird things that happen. Your flesh tones, just are destroyed. Your cheeks are white, and it's just very unflattering. But that's the only way that they can get a flash built into a camera is to do it this way. And it pops up and it blasts right in your face. What would be nice is if these lights could angle up where you can bounce the light, let's say off of a wall or off of a ceiling. Then it doesn't become so direct. It becomes much more diffused and softer, and you get a much nicer effect when you bounce light. And that's why most photographers would say don't ever use this. Okay, I mean, this is like you only use your pop-up flash if you absolutely have to, and if you have no other means of lighting a scene. Now again, to answer Ruben, your question, if you're in a low light situation like in a room, and it's a party or something, you just can't get enough light. Even if you turned all the lights on in the house, you'd still have a very low lighting situation. So you have to use flash. And my recommendation is that you use a external flash, an external flash unit that has a head that you can angle up and bounce, and you'll get a much better result. But how many of us carry around a external flash with us? Probably nobody. So this becomes the last resort. Okay, this light is better than no light, because without light we wouldn't even get the shot. It would be a blurry mess. So at least we can capture something. Okay, it's not going to be that great, but we can capture it. So what I'm trying to say is this is not a really good solution for lighting, but it's all you have, and you have to use it a lot of times. I've had to use this thing many times because it's all I have. So let's talk about how we can use this. Now I can talk about external flashes until I'm blue in the face. I could talk about soft boxes and all kind of things. Here's a light that I have up here, which is a big, not a huge light, but it's a big light that is great to have, much better than a pop-up flash. But obviously you don't slug one of those things around, so you don't have it. So let's talk about what we can do with this thing and how to use it as best you can. Now you can adjust the power of this flash. It doesn't, just because you shoot with this and it bursts out light, doesn't mean that's the only setting. So the first thing I want to do is talk about, how to control the power of this light. Now, as far as shooting somebody, because this flash is locked into its position, it's shooting straight out, there's really nothing you can do about it. I mean, you can't bounce it anywhere. It's going to shoot right into someone's face. There are some things that you can do, though, that possibly can eliminate some of just the nuclear blast in someone's face, and that is to maybe have them look off camera if that's something that is acceptable in the shot. A lot of times it's not, though, because you want them looking at the camera. You can get a little bit further away, but the angle of this flash, okay, try and keep this flash not at eye level. So if you stand a little higher, okay, maybe get on a chair and shoot down a little bit, or if you stand a little bit higher, that will alleviate what's called red eye. Red eye is when light goes right into your eye, and the red that you're seeing are the cones that are in the back of your eye. You have red and blue and green cones in the back of the eye, and it's the red ones that the light sees, and that's what causes red eye. In animals, they don't have red cones because they can't see red. So in animals, if you shoot your cat or your dog, it usually looks kind of yellow. Okay, that's the kind of reflection that you get. But when it's eye level, you're more apt to see red eye. Now there's some red eye reduction that you can do in Lightroom, which is easy to do. So if you get that, it's not that big of a deal. But when you have red eye happening in a group photo where like 5 or 6 people have red eye, that's kind of a pain in the ass to have to go in and knock out all the red eyes to everybody. And a lot of times it's so far away that it's hard to sample that red in Photoshop or Lightroom. Okay, so here's what you do is the easiest way to adjust for the compensation. What we're doing is flash compensation. Compensation simply means that we are compensating for the amount of power that's being put out by this flash. And the fastest way to do that is on the back of your camera. If you click your Q button, you'll go to your touch screen. And I think you all have touch screens on your camera. The touch screen on your camera is for flash exposure compensation, is this one that looks like the lightning bolt plus and minus sign. Okay, you'll see that there. If I can do that. And you're going to hit that, and you're going to get a scale. And it just simply says brighter or darker. So as you turn your scroll wheel, okay, you're going to go up one stop brighter, and that's going to make your flash one stop more powerful. Remember, a stop of light is a doubling of light. So that means that at one stop of flash exposure compensation, the flash is shooting twice as bright as its previous setting. And then you go up to +2, and that's 4 times as bright as 0, and so forth. And then +3. +3 is the brightest your flash will shoot. Now, if you want a distance range to go by, okay, at full +3, the most you're going to light up is something around 10 feet away. Anything further than 10 feet away, this flash is not going to be strong enough to light it properly. I mean, it'll still light something more than 10 feet away, but you're not going to get any more power out of this flash. Now, this flash is powerful for indoor shooting, but understand that it's still small and it's not nearly as powerful as some of the external flashes that you can buy. Most external flashes will throw up to literally 125, 130 feet. So let's say you're in your backyard and you're all getting together and you want to take a big group shot, and you go out on the grass and it's completely dark out there. Well, you're going to have to get at least 10 feet from them or closer in order for this flash to be effective. So don't be standing like 20 feet away. Get that group and bunch them up. Bunch them up into a tighter configuration, because your flash isn't going to be able to throw that far. But that's how you change the compensation of a flash. Now, another thing, and I find myself using this even more than more power, is actually less power. Sometimes you shoot, and if you're shooting someone, a few feet away, and you use flash, and man, I mean, their face just lights up and just blows out completely, then you need to come down in your flash exposure compensation and just kind of twirl this down until the light is, not as bright on their face. Remember, there's a lot of things in Lightroom that you can do to brighten and darken things, but you first of all need enough light there, but you don't want so much light that you're blowing stuff out, because once you blow out highlights, you can't get them back. Okay, even if you're shooting in RAW, you can't get those highlights back. If you blow out the cheeks and the, things like that, and the tip of the nose, there's nothing that's going to happen that you can recover. So I would shoot underexposed a little bit rather than overexposed. Okay, always shoot a little bit darker if you're not sure than shooting too much, too bright. Okay, so that's how you control the power of your flash. And what I would suggest you do, in fact, what your assignment is going to be, is to take your flash now and pop it up and go indoors and choose an aperture setting. Okay, and you'll notice that when you choose wide apertures like that, like f11, I mean not wide apertures, but small apertures, your flash is going to have to work a lot harder because it's letting less light into the camera. So what I would suggest you do is go indoors, okay, into a dark room, and ramp down your aperture so it's as wide as it can be at 3.5. But at 3.5, you're going to have to also be at 18, which is very wide. Now, if you want to go to 55 and zoom in, then your aperture on your lens is going to close down to 5.6. So try different apertures, try different focal lengths, zoom ranges, and then try different exposure compensations with your flash, different powers, flash power, until you get, it the way you want. And work the shot. Okay, what we do when we practice is we work a shot. Working a shot simply means that, well, every photographer knows that you never get the right shot on the first attempt. Okay, that I know, and no matter how long you've shot, no matter how experienced you are, every photographer knows that, you could get close. With the more knowledge and experience that you have, the closer that first shot is going to be. But I guarantee you that you're going to have to make an adjustment. There's a little challenge, a photography challenge that I used to give, and it's called getting it right in 3 shots, meaning that whatever you're shooting, you only have 3 shots to get it right, to get the exposure right, to get the, basically exposure. As far as fiddling with your aperture, your ISO, your shutter speeds, and all of that, and flash. And that means that in order to get it right, you have to kind of know what adjustments to make. And that's going to be a key to you being a better photographer. I'm going to get off of my camera here and go back to me. And when I started shooting weddings, I really paid attention to that, and I really practiced that, because in a wedding, sometimes you don't even have a chance to get it to take 3 shots. Sometimes you have to get it right in that first shot. Bride and groom walking down the aisle, and here they come, right? You don't have 3 shots. You can't tell them, gee, can you do that again? So we have to make sure that we have the exact settings and lighting and power and all of that, so that when they hit that spot, we know that we're going to get, a good shot. So, practice in anything that you do is the way you get good. But you have to know what you're practicing. So that's the exercise I'd like you to do, is play around with your flash, pop it up, try different flash exposure compensations, try different lighting conditions, like go from one room to another. Go into a brightly lit room and don't use flash and see what that looks like. And then you pop up your flash and see what the difference is. Then go into a dark room and see, how that works. That's the only way you're going to really get a grip on your equipment and what your camera does. And so the next time once you know that, the next time you're in that situation and you have to shoot that, you'll know exactly what settings to set. So, we talked about shooting landscapes. We talked about shooting portraits. We talked about the camera settings for landscapes, the camera settings for portraits, or shallower depth of field. Portraits can be, food shots, product shots, people shots, anything where you want selective focus. You want focus on one thing and not on, let's say, the background or the foreground. And now the other kind of common situation is shooting indoors in low light conditions, and you do have a mechanism on your camera, your pop-up flash, that allows you to capture those things. And this is what these cameras are designed to do. They're designed for general photography, meaning what most people are going to shoot with a camera like this. Now, once you get beyond the general photography, well, you never get beyond general photography. You're always shooting that. Birthday parties, events, things like that. But as a graphic designer, you might get into other types of photography, or maybe at work, they're asking you to shoot, different things, products or, and in that case, you might need some different lenses and not necessarily camera bodies, but the deal is that you spend money on lenses. Lenses is what most photographers invest in. In fact, their lens collection way outweighs the price of their camera body. The camera body is something that's going to change probably, nowadays it's changing every year. You're getting upgraded features in the body itself, but the lenses will never change. And the lenses are something that you'll keep for the rest of your life. So photographers know that, it's, man, if they gotta, pull out $1,500 for a lens, it hurts, but they know that they're going to have that lens for forever. Now, that of course is if you stay with the same, brand of camera. A lot of people have swapped and changed from Canons to Sonys over the last couple of years. It's been 2 years now where there's been a mass exodus of professional photographers going from Canon to Sony. And there's reasons for that, but we won't get into that. But Canon is still a major brand, and they do have a whole series of mirrorless cameras now that are now starting to compete with Sony. Really, Sony had dominated the market in the last 5 years in mirrorless photography, mirrorless cameras. So anyway, there's just, like I said, there's just so much to talk about in this that I am going to dedicate again Monday instead of art direction team projects. We'll talk about that a little bit, but on Monday I do want to again talk more about photography. Actually, I want to talk about video. Wednesday, I believe, is our last day next week, and Wednesday is actually the 23rd, I believe. And that's the end of the module already. So we just have today and Monday, and we'll meet again on Wednesday. I'll try and make that very short. And then there's the holiday break. But video is what the next thing we're going to talk about is, and using this camera for that. So does anybody have any questions about anything?
The assignment that you said that we were going to do, the one that you said on Monday, that one is due today, right?
Today, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's something that for Wednesday, and I think it's just a discussion question. Wednesdays are discussion questions, and Sundays are actually assignments that you would turn in. And I'm trying to make the discussion questions just questions that you might have, forcing you to ask a question. And I know several of you did for that first photography question, and I, tried to answer it as best I could in a text. This is something for me that, I need to be next to you, and demonstrating in class. And well, you were there when I did you were all there when I did the video editing, right? Where we actually set that shot up with Chris, and I had the lights going and soft boxes and all of that stuff, right? I mean, that's just impossible to do in this format. Photography is something where I'm around the room and, setting up stuff and anything. But anything that I could possibly answer, I'll do my best to answer. Also, I want to keep it open to, and I do this with all my students, regardless of where I teach, to feel free to ask any questions about photography, any specific questions that relate to what you're doing or what you're shooting, even after this class is over or after you're out of Platt College. I mean, just hit me up with an email, and I'll be more than happy to. In fact, I've met with students after class, after they left my class. They'll call me up and they say, and I'll say, hey, let's meet at the park, and let's shoot. Let's shoot something. I'll go down to Victoria Beach and I'll put it up on Facebook like I'm going to Victoria Beach. If anyone wants to go, I'll be there at 10 o'clock in the morning. And we shoot. So I wanted to have a field trip. What's that?
I have a quick question about
Yeah.
I tend to, whenever I do these pull the photos from camera Lightroom Classic
Mm-hmm.
to Photoshop, they tend to have distortion, or tend to have like a blemish on them, and I'm not exactly sure why. Like, I remember the one to do the flower I sent
Mm-hmm.
you on the side, it had like a green blur, and I couldn't get rid of it, and I don't know exactly how to mitigate that.
Oh, okay. Okay. Um, I'm just going to go here because you did bring up a question that I did want to address, and that was uh, in Lightroom. Okay, now if you have, I'm not sure exactly what your green blur was, but to me, sometimes if you have something like that in a photograph, it could possibly be what's called a lens flare. And that's when your lens, when the sun actually hits the lens of the camera and it produces flare. And flare can manifest itself in all kind of different ways, in circles, in colors, like sometimes it's red, sometimes it's yellow. But usually lens flare is a phenomenon of the sun hitting the lens. And that's why we use these lens shades, to block out sun from hitting the lens
Okay.
itself. But if you did have to go into Lightroom and take something out, like see this little, I don't know if you could see this little squirrel right here. I mean, this squirrel, this little sea lion right here in the water.
Yeah.
But Lightroom has what's called a spot removal tool right up here. And when you click on that, it becomes a circle, and you can make it bigger with your scroll wheel. And I'm going to make it as big and as wide as this squirrel, I keep calling it squirrel, sea lion is. And I'll click once, and you see how it sampled this area here? It's like the clone tool. It's like the clone stamp tool. And as I move this around, it starts sampling different areas of that water. And usually what I want to do is kind of match up the water, and then I'll let go. And then when I come off of this tool, it's kind of like, you could still see the edges here though,
Yeah.
So you might want to do it smaller and in pieces. But this is kind of like a cheap man's clone stamp tool in
Okay.
Lightroom. Okay, so you can get rid of it that way. That's one possibility. So if you have other things like, little little things like this, like these things. Let me get up a little closer than that. Okay. And I'll use my stamp tool, my spot removal tool, and I'll get this tool down really small. And I'll come in here and maybe just kind of click and see how it's sampled up here,
Yeah.
and click, and it's sampled down here. It didn't sample right. So I can move the sample around to different areas.
Okay.
Okay? So you can get rid of things that way if you don't want to take it into Photoshop and use the spot healing brush or the healing brush. Actually, just to make mention of those two tools, the healing brush and the spot healing brush in Photoshop, much better than whatever's in Lightroom.
Gotcha.
So, but Lightroom is a quick fix, so you could do that. Okay, distortion now is a thing that, okay, like a lot of you took panoramas, and I did make mention that in some of the panoramas it looked like there was some kind of distortion, meaning that the horizon was kind of bending, it was kind of curving. And there is a feature inside of Lightroom that's used to fix that, and that would be in the right panel under your manual. It defaults to profile right here, but in your manual section right here, you will see distortion. And when you move this, okay, if you watch what's happening, it's either bringing the object closer to you, like a wide angle fisheye lens would, which is called, wide angle distortion, or it's pushing it back, which is, they call it pin cushioning. And pin cushioning is when you take it and you push back the photo. So it's like you're bending a piece of paper backwards like that. And what that does, what it tends to do is it tends to level out the bend of a, of distortion. And then you can just go into your constrained crop, okay? Because when it does that, you see the outer edges here. And then when you hit constrained crop, it automatically crops it and it fixes it. Okay, so you can try that. Now there's some other distortion features that you can also use. And we'll do that with buildings. And let me see if I can find a building really quick. Especially when you shoot something wide angle. Okay, so I'm going to do this. Okay. Now, this was shot very close with a little wide setting. Okay, now when you shoot close and something above your camera lens, what you're going to get is this distortion that goes it kind of starts converging to the top. You could see these lines right here. They're starting to get closer, these parallel lines. They should be parallel, right? But because of the lens and the aperture that you're using, the focal length that you're using, it starts distorting and starts pyramiding, if you will. So watch what happens when I take this feature right here, this vertical transformation. It's under the transform tab. And I move this back. Okay. You see that parallel line get more, see how the lines are now more parallel to each other?
Yeah.
These. And then again, you want to hit your constrained crop. Another thing you can use is this horizontal movement, which kind of moves kind of skews the page left to right, like that. It's almost like you're twisting it. That could be, look at this line right here, this horizontal line. Can you see this white horizontal line here? When I move this, see how it gets off axis right here? See how it's crooked now?
Yeah.
So if you shot a picture and that happened, you can fix it by doing this, okay, by twisting it. So play around with these transformation, the vertical, the horizontal, and then the distortion here. Gotcha. And for a lot of shots, you can fix things. Now there is a lens, and without getting into so much, they call it a tilt shift lens. And if you look under Canon's lens selection, they have these tilt shift lenses. And a tilt shift lens is actually a lens that attaches to the camera and will tilt up and down when the camera, even when the camera body is straight forward. It actually tilts down and tilts up. And what that does, it's an architectural lens. It's meant for shooting architectural shots. For going inside of hotel rooms and shooting interiors of a two-suite bedroom, for their website, right? You're in very confined quarters. You want to capture the entire room, so you have to use an ultra-wide-angle lens, but you get massive distortion when you use a wide-angle lens, where walls become curved or angled. So in order to compensate for that, they buy a tilt shift lens and they tilt it up. And those walls now flatten out and get parallel. And so you can shoot a very tight quarter interior room with straight walls. And that's how they do it with a tilt shift lens. Now this is what Lightroom is trying to do to compensate. It's almost like it's giving you a tilt shift lens. This is exactly what a tilt shift lens would do on a camera body when you take it straight out of camera.
Yeah.
So Lightroom gives you that feature. And it's really cool. You can make your buildings real nice and straight. But anyway, does that help?
Yes.
Okay. So use that distortion and maybe that'll work. Okay, that's all I have for today. I'll put up the assignment. It's going to be a very kind of generalized assignment in terms of shooting with your flash. All I want you to do is practice, play around with it, play around with those settings we talked about, and see what you get. And you know, then we'll talk about video on Monday. Alrighty.
Sounds good.
Okay, then I will see all you guys. Stay safe. Have a great weekend.
You too.
You
Okay.
too.
Take care.